We're going to take a moment to thank our patrons. In the House of Stone, we have Melissa Russell,
Liv Matlin,
Fighting Chance Studio,
Krisha Dolan,
Aya Kamurakwan,
Aaron Navarro,
Allison Connors,
Alexander Eagleson. That's a cool name.
I love that so much. Okay, and then in the House of Flame, we have Spaghetti Sandwich,
Pokela,
Natalie Curry,
Leah Tab,
Katie Grant,
JS,
Francie Dillon, my mother,
Cynthia Johnson,
Corey Little,
Birdie Tam,
and we are welcoming to the House of Flame Amber Costley and
Celeste Gantz?
yes, that's my aunt.
Celeste Gantz.
Yeah.
By the way, Birdie Tam, we saw your new studio. Congratulations.
Hell yeah. And if you would like to support us and support the show, you can go to patreon.com/Lindsey M Dillon. And now, for this week's blessing, we have an auditory experience. This is The Mud Peddlers, a podcast where two nerdy ceramic artists share the behind the scenes of their worlds of clay. We're your hosts, Lindsey M Dillon.
And I am Donte of Earth Nation.
Welcome to The Mud Peddlers.
Welcome. How are you?
Zdravstvuyte, comrade. We говорите по-английски. I'm sorry, it's
I don't
weird.
know what just happened.
I just spoke some really bad Russian. I should learn some Ukrainian words. Anyway, today we are going to be talking sort of science.
Sort of science.
Yeah, we're going to be discussing the difference between oxidation and reduction firing.
And a little bit of some other stuff too. There's a middle ground to it.
There's a middle ground. Yeah. But I feel like that's one of the things, especially when you're just learning how to do ceramics. I keep wanting to laugh when I look at you. I don't know why.
My face is
I drank a ton of coffee this morning.
from
That's
the
also part of
from
it.
the coffee.
From the coffee. I drink a lot of coffee. It's helping me get ready for Sac Anime, which by the time this episode comes out will be done. Hopefully I sold enough stuff. Anyway.
That reminds us, we need to say that our shop update.
Yes.
Yours is already there, right? Or when are you
no.
updating your shop?
Dude, I gotta wait till Sac Anime to figure that out.
Okay, mine was updated last month, and there's maybe like 20 mugs left. It's
Okay. So,
oxidation versus reduction.
Oxidation versus reduction.
A lot of you wonder, what is oxidation? What is reduction? And
So-
we're gonna do it now!
Oh my god.
We're gonna do it now!
It's gonna be so great!
It's gonna be so great!
So, Donte,
start it off.
what is the main difference between oxidation and reduction firing?
So if you have an oxidation kiln, it's most likely an electric kiln.
Okay.
Most people have electric kilns in their households. It's like
Yeah.
70-something% of you with electric kilns have oxidation kilns in households, right?
And those are the kinds of kilns that most of us have seen. They plug into the same kind of plug-in that
Yep.
a dryer plugs into.
They run off electricity.
So many of the scut kilns.
And I say electric kilns because there are kilns that run off of pure fire,
gas.
right? Gas, yeah.
I run off of fire!
Straight fire! It's lit!
Oh, that's gonna be the episode title. It's lit. Yes.
Electric kilns or oxidation kilns usually have oxygen free-flowing through the kiln itself as it's firing.
Okay.
So there's oxygen molecules all throughout the kiln, right? They're in the glaze, they're in the air, they're inside the kiln. There's nothing in there reducing the amount of oxygen in the kiln to make certain chemical reactions, okay? In a reduction kiln has usually gas fire in it, eating up those oxygen molecules so that there's a reduction of oxygen inside of the kiln. And that usually changes the chemical properties, or just kind of takes away the oxygen, of the glazes in the kiln, and sometimes makes really interesting interactions. That's really the only difference in between oxidation and reduction. Oxygen, there's oxygen in the kiln. Reduction is a reduction of oxygen in the kiln. That's it. That's it. That's the whole explanation.
And that's the episode.
That's the whole episode. But really interesting stuff happens in the kiln when you reduce oxygen versus have free-flowing oxygen in the kiln chamber.
Okay.
And by the way, I keep saying chamber because my glaze chemistry books and my manual kilns call a kiln a chamber because a chamber is the inside of the kiln.
Right.
But if you say kiln,
that's like the whole
That's
kiln.
the entire kiln.
Yes, but when you say chamber, that's just the inside.
the inside of the kiln with the brick and the elements in the
Yeah. Okay.
I'm trying really hard to like layman's it down.
Okay.
Because my brain is transferring like all the technical words into like fire, eat oxygen.
Yeah.
In kiln, make reduction in oxygen. Oxygen not there, make glaze go red, sometimes not green.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm trying.
Okay. Well, for the nerds among us,
yes,
can you go into a little bit of the like toe in the water of the science behind why the lack of oxygen in the kiln creates different glaze effects. Like, what exactly is happening to the glaze that makes it behave differently?
Yeah, 100%. So let's take copper as the primary example of what happens in a kiln when you're firing stuff in a reduction kiln, right?
Okay.
So you have a pot, it has copper glaze on it.
Okay.
Which means it has like copper oxide, copper carbonate in the glaze.
Yeah.
Whatever glaze you made or got from the company, whatever, right? You put it in a reduction kiln, gas fired, big old brick kiln.
Yeah.
Fire goes in. Fire goes in when it's being fired. Oxygen is, and this is the way it was explained to me, so I'm going to say it this way because I think this is a better way to explain it. The fire is eating oxygen molecules in order to allow itself to burn. Fire needs oxygen molecules in order to be fire, essentially.
Right.
Well, when you have it inside of a kiln or the chamber, it takes as much oxygen from anywhere inside that chamber as it can in order to thrive and keep burning. And it essentially just keeps eating oxygen molecules.
So it finds oxygen molecules wherever it can.
Wherever
so in the
it can.
case of, I wish I had like a 1980s style animation for this. You know, like in the classroom.
The fire's like eating the oxygen.
Yeah, and then it starts getting choked.
Mickey Mouse style.
Oh God. So fire goes into the kiln. It's eating up the oxygen.
To
it's
survive.
like, cool, this is great. And then it's like, oh, I have no oxygen. Where am I going to find the oxygen to continue being fire? And it goes, oh, sweet, there's some glaze.
There's some copper there.
Yeah.
And that copper has oxygen in it.
Right, like the actual chemical compound itself with like the little hexagons and the lines.
And the oxygen attached to the...
We all learned in high school.
It takes it from the glazes and the clay bodies a lot of the time in order to continue to be fire, in order to continue to burn. This is actually a difficult thing to do because if you're doing a reduction kiln with gas firing, you'll often try and like put in the most amount of fire to reduce the amount of oxygen in the kiln, but you can't put in too much fire or else it eats up like a lot more oxygen than you need it to, and the fire doesn't burn as intensely and you don't get the proper heat.
Oh, interesting.
You can't just like get a flamethrower and like
yeah.
You know what I mean? So because of that chemical reaction in between the fire taking all the oxygen molecules from, let's just keep on saying with copper glazes, the chemical reaction ends up making the color red instead of green. And I am not scientific enough to know the actual. I'm not like, oh yeah, this molecule separates from this molecule, and that makes a color differential, and like yeah, I don't know that. All I know is that the fire ends up taking a lot of the oxygen molecules from the glazes and the clay and whatnot, and it makes a change in color. And that's the main difference between oxygen. So it's very difficult to get a red in an oxygen kiln from copper itself.
Okay, because the copper needs that lack of oxygen to turn red.
100%.
You know, that makes me think of, like, I feel like one of the first ways that people become aware of this concept of the role that oxygen plays in glaze color is with raku firings, because I mean, I remember the first time I did a raku firing, I used a glaze that had a lot of copper in it.
Yeah.
And, you know, so the copper went into the kiln, and it was just it was a raku kiln, so I guess it was technically gas fired.
Right.
And then, you know, we pulled it out of the kiln, we put it in the trash can with a lot of stuff, but the flow of oxygen, I think, in that trash can meant that some parts of the glaze, of the copper glaze, were red and other parts were green.
There's just hella carbon in there too. There's just hella smoke and
there's a lot of interesting stuff going on in there. But I feel like that's one of the first times people are like, oh wow, like why does this one glaze turn out like two different kinds of colors? So even outside of the oxidation kiln versus reduction kiln or electric kiln compared to a gas kiln, there can be instances where oxygen still plays a role in how the glaze color turns out, like in a raku firing.
Yes, and keep in mind there are kilns that are like, well, you can technically have an electric kiln that doesn't have a complete oxygenated atmosphere inside of it. There are kilns out there that are like fire, but oxygen kiln. You know, like ox kilns. And there are some electric kilns out there that are like, neutral kilns where you got a bit of both.
Oh yeah, that's what I was going to ask is like, so, and again, I'm playing interview role today, which I love because I love getting to ask questions.
And I love talking too much.
Yay! I was going to ask, can you have a kiln that does both oxidation and reduction, and then can you do in a single firing, can you have both oxidation and reduction happening in the same firing?
So I think when you ask that question, you might be asking for the kiln to be, for lack of a better term, like segregated into like, the top half is oxygen and the bottom half is reduction.
Well, sort of more like, as I remember Sacramento City College, we had a couple different gas kilns, but throughout the firing, the professor would change the amount of oxygen going into the kiln.
Yep.
So I'm essentially answering the question myself now.
Well, you're good.
But it's essentially, so I wanted us to talk about like how kilns can have both oxidation and reduction happening throughout the kiln. Like you have a period where there's like very little oxygen, and then you can adjust and have more oxygen to like maybe raise the temperature and then reduce it again.
Yes.
So how does that work?
So usually I had like a huge kiln, so whenever I think about reduction kilns, I think about like this huge, like too tall person. Yoshio, the first kilns I ever worked in were cone 10 reduction kilns. And I thought like, oh, okay, this is how pottery works. You just need straight fire in there, I guess. But he had these things called flumes and dampers. They're basically holes in the kiln. He would basically put in and take out the holes in the kiln to let oxygen in or out of the kiln in order to make the oxygen go up or down, and he would control it that way. What are you doing?
Step teacher, what are you doing? Step things going out in the...
I'm just putting the brick back in the hole.
But oh my, I'm sorry.
Teacher, no.
Oh, no.
Step ladder, no.
Good Lord. I'm sorry. Carry on. Carry on. We're good. I just had to...
So, by controlling the flumes and the dampers, you can essentially control the flow of oxygen. But fire is going to continuously be going in there, right? Especially with the type of kilns I worked with, where it's like just gas fire in there, right?
Okay.
You can control. It's not like you plug up all the holes, you just put it in there and it works out.
Right.
You got to control the amount of oxygen. Yoshio, weirdly enough, could do it by just looking at the fire.
Oh, that's cool.
He would look at the fire and be like, "That needs more oxygen." He would like take out a hole or two, and then he would, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
He had some equipment as well that would read those things off, but most of the time he was just like, I could tell.
Okay.
You know, but you can get what is called a neutral firing kiln. I have seen one. I think Hishin, the person who's on YouTube, I'm sure a lot of you know him. And he has an electric firing neutral kiln.
So just to preface this,
it's weird.
Generally speaking,
yeah.
Electric kilns tend to be oxidation kilns.
Generally speaking, yes.
Gas firing kilns, people tend to do reduction firings in gas kilns, but they can also be oxidation firings.
Yeah, well, if you have a reduction kiln, you can essentially introduce lots of oxygen into the chamber, into the kiln, and get more oxygen at will, essentially. Or you can do a neutral firing and have less oxygen here and there at will, right? Okay. Or reduction. But most people don't build or buy a reduction kiln to do oxidation and neutral firing.
Right, because it's easy enough just to buy an electric kiln that does electric firings.
It's like you can build one, but it takes like a team of people.
It's a whole thing.
It's a whole thing.
Yeah. So the neutral firing kilns are electric kilns that can do closer to reduction firings, even if they're not full-blown reduction firings.
They're out there. I've seen one in my lifetime.
That's interesting.
Or at least the person that was handling it. I was like, oh, an oxidation kiln. And she's like, actually, it's neutral. And I was like, what? You can do that? And she was like, yeah, we can do that. We just got to do this. And my baby Potter brain was like, that's magic.
I mean, ceramics is magic. Like, we're straight up freaking, it's madness.
It's really bad alchemy is what it is.
It's sick-ass alchemy. I need to stop cursing. It's sick alchemy. Yeah. Okay, so what are the differences in how the glaze presents in a reduction firing versus an oxidation firing? Like, what kinds of colors do you tend to get?
Darker colors, usually. The clay body...
For which firings?
For reduction firings.
Okay.
Oxidation usually creates brighter colors. Like, well, technically speaking, the higher up the firing chain that you go and the closer to reduction that you go, the darker the clay bodies and the glazes go. Okay. So if you do like cone 04, like low fire stuff, if you put an underglaze on there, you're getting the color of that underglaze. And it's usually going to be a bit brighter than usual. Once you get to cone 5 and 6, it gets a little bit more melty. It gets a little bit more unpredictable, I would say.
Yeah. I feel like I've seen glaze companies like Coyote and like Amico and Mako that, you know, really try hard to get those bright colors on mid-range firings like cone 5, cone 6 firings. Yeah. But yeah, like what you're saying, generally speaking, the lower temperatures and the more oxygen, the brighter the colors.
And vice versa as well. Some companies try and like, oh, this cone 6 glaze looks exactly like a cone 10 reduction.
Yeah, that actually...
They're trying to cater to us because we're like, oh, we want to do cone 10 now.
Yeah. That reminds me of Speckled Buff, which I feel like has become a really popular...
Oh, I love Speckled Buff, and I hate that I love it so much. I hate that I love it. It's somebody said it was the pumpkin spice latte of clothes. Because you just put gloss over it, and it looks good by itself, but you're like, this is really basic.
It does. But I mean, it's so fun, though, because it is a way to get that effect. Because, like, I remember when I was first doing ceramics, my first I was like a junior in high school, and
Yeah.
I got to participate in a gas-fired kiln reduction firing, and I had this cup that was like, oh, it's got speckles on it now.
Yeah. Oh.
How did that happen?
I didn't even do anything to it. It just has speckles.
It just has speckles, yeah. And in a reduction firing, because again, that fire is trying to pull oxygen from wherever
Yeah.
it can, that can change the components in the clay body itself and give speckles where there normally wouldn't be. But if that same clay was fired in a oxidation environment, you wouldn't get those speckles. Yeah. But then the speckled buff gives you the speckles
Of course.
in an oxidation firing, and it's fun.
And keep in mind that I'm trying really hard to explain it as, at least I think that's what my specialty is to put things as I don't want to say layman's.
Well, yeah,
You know, as possible to explain it to the general public. Because I guarantee there's one of you nerds right now is like, actually, the chemical compounds and oxygen and copper. Shut up, you nerd. We're trying to do a PSA here, and you're making it way more complicated than it has to be.
Yeah. And there are, like, if you are interested in the nitty-gritty science of, like, okay, yeah, fire eats the oxygen, but, like, how?
Yeah.
You know, if you want to know that, there is lots of really, really well-written articles and, like, YouTube videos out there that go into more of the intense science behind it. We're just kind of like, hey, if you've never really understood the difference here, we're trying to introduce that on a more introductory level. So.
I actually did a YouTube video on it, I want to say about 2 months ago, oxidation versus reduction.
When I was doing research, your video was one of the first ones to pop up, and I was like, it's Donte.
I love that, and I hate it at the same time. Because whenever I want to search a more in-depth short-term video on, like, oh, like, I've looked up before, how do I build a better pit fire kiln?
Yeah.
And my video pops up. And I hate it
Dude,
so much.
You're like that Spider-Man meme where it's like, hey!
I hate it so much. They're like, yeah, you're the guy. I'm like,
You're the guy, you're the other person. Yep.
Little bit of a flex. I've met new partisan stores, and they've just been like, oh, yeah, I'm wondering how to do this, this, and this. And I've been like, oh, yeah, just type it into Google. And they'll, like, type it into Google on their phone. They're like, that's you! And I'm like, yeah, but don't click that one, though.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, I'm not trying to flex on you
I'm not
now.
trying to, like, direct you to my stuff, but if you looked it up, I would show up on the...
Yeah.
I would show up, probably, on Google.
Yeah. Yeah, you would.
Other than that, oh, sorry, I backtracked.
No,
I'm
you're
so
good.
sorry.
You're good.
So the deeper down the list you go, usually, so like reduction firing usually has a lot more unpredictable glaze reactions. It's a little bit more melty. It's a bit darker. I call it tasty. It's a bit tastier. You know what I mean? Because I'm really into like dark, melty colors with multi-dimensional. Like, I don't want just brown. I want like brown and blue and like some type of yellow, you know, stuff like that.
So you get like surface variations just because of how the fire and how the
It's more
oxygen moves around in the kiln. So you can essentially, if I'm understanding correctly, because again, it's been a while since I've done a gas firing, so you can have one glaze around the entire pot.
Yes.
But because of the way that the heat moves and the flow of oxygen, you can have variations in that
100%.
surface texture even with one glaze.
Especially with porcelain. I had a porcelain, I'll never forget her, right? She was this big, my first gourd, made of Coleman porcelain, with Celsor Oribe on it. Is it Celsor Oribe or just some type of different Oribe? But that's what it was called, and Yoshi had the recipe to it, and I loved it, and I had like a beautiful, like, dark jade green with like these beautiful red spots, and I still have it, it's gorgeous. But
I don't think I've ever seen that. You'll have to show me.
I might have given it to Abel.
I mean, well, she's your wife, so she probably has it.
she probably has it. Another thing, side point, is that there are certain chemicals when making your own glazes that can kind of mirror the effects of a reduction firing. So there's a chemical called silicon carbide.
Okay.
Silicon carbide, and this is my best interpretation of it because it's difficult to explain what it actually does. Silicon carbide will make little pockets of carbon in any glaze that you put it in, and this includes copper. So sometimes if you put silicon carbide and you mix it up real well inside of a copper base, especially if you make your own glazes, it'll make these little spots of red. I think John Britt has one called John Britt's Oribe or John Britt's Red, something like that. And silicon carbide is used to make a little bit of red. I actually have a picture of it on my Instagram somewhere.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'll see if I can find it and post it. But it had green and red. But you would look at it and be like, wow, that green looks oxygen, but like that red looks... You can't get red from copper inside of an oxygen kiln, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
But you can do it, it's just hard. I've been doing experiments with silicon carbide recently. it messes up every glaze. It bubbles and pits everything except for copper.
Oh my gosh.
I don't know why.
I'm sure Digital Fire has an article on that.
Digital Fire, yeah. I Digital Fire anytime I look at a chemical, and lithium carbide's been the one I've been doing right now. But I look at the chemical and I'm like, what is that?
Yeah.
And then I'll search it and be like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's why they did that.
Yeah, for some reference, we've talked about this before, Donte and I have talked about this before, but Digital Fire, again, for those science nerds among all of us, Digital Fire has is a website that has a lot of the nitty-gritty science behind the chemistry of ceramics. So if you are interested in like, what the heck does this chemical do? Or like, what is an oxidation firing? Right. It can go into the nittiest, grittiest details.
Digital Fire and glazy.org are the two websites that I need in my life ever.
Yeah.
I don't even touch most of my chemistry books anymore. They not only have pictures and information that I need, but they always have like, if you're probably looking for this right here. And I'm like, oh, thank you.
Right.
It has like the chemical weight and the structure of it's great. It's fantastic.
Us discussing like is it silicon carbide?
Silicon carbide.
Yeah, so us discussing the silicon carbide and then the speckled buff glaze reminds me of something that like I really wanted to talk about in this episode that has to do with not necessarily the science behind the reduction versus oxidation firings, but access and materials. Because one of the things that can be difficult with transitioning from a school education environment to a post-school environment is access to the resources that the school has.
We're spoiled.
We do get spoiled. We get really spoiled. So one of the things that can happen and things that I've seen some college students go through is they're used to doing cone 10 reduction firings or soda firings or salt firings or wood firings, and then they graduate and then all of a sudden they don't have access to those same materials, those same tools anymore.
We used to have a kiln that I could walk into.
Oh.
I know.
And those always kind of scare me though. They make me claustrophobic, but
I like small spaces.
Oh, okay.
Big women, small spaces. It's my thing.
I love that. I love that. Yeah. So I guess my little, part of this PSA.
Yeah.
Because, like, listeners will know that one of my biggest beefs is school environment's lack of preparing students for the post-school world.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah, like, how do you, like, the business behind ceramics. That's part of the reason we do this podcast is to fill that gap. I'm so sorry. Anyway, I apologize, Donte. I'm on that level today. Whew. Anyway, if you are in an environment where you're in school, you're learning ceramics for the first time, regardless of whether you want to continue ceramics as a hobby or as a professional endeavor, but I think particularly if you're interested in doing this as a professional endeavor, consider while you're still in school, learning what the other options are for firings, and just even if it's in small ways, educate yourself or ask your professor like, hey, I really like that we do cone 10 reduction firings here. Are there other places in this area, either stores, that have those similar kinds of kilns?
100%.
Or, we do cone 10 reduction firings here, but I won't have access to that after school. Can you tell me a little bit about, or could I in the class work on some cone 5-6 oxidation pieces instead?
1000%. You get coddled while you're in school. You get, all the glazes are good for you and half the equipment's clean, and you clean your table, and then the person next to you cleans their table, and then over time, everyone's table's clean. When you have your own studio, you gotta clean your whole studio. That's your responsibility.
Yeah.
Everybody cleans their own dish in the household. There's no dishes, but you're in a space where you just have a pile of your own dishes now.
Yeah, you gotta deal with your own stuff. But.
Yeah, and it's all the chemical, when you think about it, that 5-gallon bucket of glaze in your class that they let you have, or the bottles of glaze, either cost $17 each or $300 a bucket of 1,000 grams of copper. You know what I mean? It's you get very lucky, and especially with the firing process, because if I were to really break it down, and this might be a bit of a tangent, ceramic art in and of itself has 5 different forms of art that you need to master individually in order to be good at the whole process.
Right.
So you need to be good at forming, And then you need to be good at like trimming.
Yeah.
And then you need to be good at glazing. And each and every one of those can be separated
into
like,
a bunch of different
bunch of different, yeah.
And that's not even thinking about whether you're harvesting or formulating your own clay body.
100%.
Like, that's a whole other thing.
Yep, and there's some tools that help you kind of skip some of those steps. Like you can buy bottled glazes.
Right.
You know what I mean? Not to say you're skipping that step, but you can buy stuff to make it easier. Like you can buy a Giffen grip to help you trim.
Yeah.
Or you can buy slip molds to help you slip cast. Those things are individually hard by themselves, but they help the process a little bit. On top of that, you need to be your own kiln master. You need to know how to load your own kiln.
Yeah.
You need to clean your own shelves, and those are their own individual things. You need to know how to run and operate your own kiln. You get very lucky in school when you have someone who just does that for you.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, most of those things are done for you.
And I'll say that for electric kilns, because I think it would be fair to say that outside of an educational environment, the easiest thing to do is to get a oxidation kiln.
Yeah, that's the easiest to hold in the household.
Yeah. The nice thing is, firing one of those is super, super easy. When I was in school, we did oxidation cone 5 firings, but the kilns themselves had their own firing schedule that the studio technician created.
Yeah.
When I got my kiln, I literally just did there's 3 buttons to push to do a firing, and it's super easy.
Super easy.
But if you are, again, if you're used to being in an educational environment where the studio technician spends 12 hours adjusting a reduction gas kiln firing to change the, if somebody else is taking care of the most complicated firing processes,
the airflow and
then just know that that's going to be not that you can't do it, because obviously you can learn how to do that,
of course,
but that's going to be a step that you'll need to learn before you graduate if you want to continue to do that same kind of work. So I feel like you have 2 options. You can either figure out where other similar local resources can be and adjust your making to those parameters, or like using the silicon carbide, or speckled buff glazes, find ways to mimic those effects that you like in a less complicated environment of being able to maybe buy your own kiln. But again, of course, then that's like assuming you have your own studio space.
That comes with some privilege. That comes with you gotta have space and time, and money, and you know what I mean.
I do think most ceramic supply stores or studio spaces do oxidation firings. Like Alpha does oxidation firings. I think Sincere Ceramics does oxidation firings. Verge Center for the Arts does oxidation firings.
They're just the
IMCO,
easiest.
That tends to be the most common.
It's only when you get up into and I don't mean to say this is a higher tier than the others, but once you get into the upper echelons of art, that's when they're like, oh, you use this unknown chemical in the glaze, oh, reduction fire. There is a certain space of the ceramic art world where they're like, oh, it's low fire.
Oh yeah, I mean, admittedly
those
though,
people
dude,
suck, but
we were those people though.
Yeah,
on an earlier episode when we were talking about glazes.
Look, I love low fire.
I mean, not glazes. When we were talking about choosing your own clay, and somebody called us out on it, which I actually really appreciate.
Yeah, no,
because we were totally being like, low clay is worst clay, and it's like, no, it's just we were just being those people.
We come from a functional point of view where it's just less functional, but from an artistic point of view,
that's not necessarily true though.
It's 100% true.
Okay, we will peg that. Good Lord, we will put that. We will bookmark that. We will bookmark that.
No, keep going.
As another episode. Actually, I would really love to learn about that.
I hate low fire clay. I love low fire glaze.
That's fair. Okay. Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yes.
Because I don't like it. I don't like. I think it comes from the fact that I worked with Steve's White one time and I got hives and I was like, I hate this. I'm allergic to this. I don't know, but I'm probably allergic to it in the same way that people who eat a piece of bread and get a stomachache one time are like, oh, I'm gluten intolerant, but they never went to go get it checked out.
Oh, okay.
They just kind of correlated one thing and now it's stuck in their head.
Right.
Somewhere.
Yeah. So you like the glazes that come with low fire oxidation.
Yeah. Because the glazes that come with low fire oxidation, or low fire in general, when you buy the bottle, that's the color you're gonna get. You buy some red, you're getting that shade of red.
Yeah.
But the higher the fire you go, the more melty and the more temperature and the more heat it takes in, the more, even my personal made glazes, my Randy's red turns 3 or 4 different colors.
Yeah.
I've never done it in low fire, but I bet it would stay one color in low fire if I developed it to be a low fire. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It wouldn't be red though.
Yeah.
It would not be red.
I feel like it also does depend on the glaze, because I've bought commercial mid-range fire glazes that like the thing that you see on their test tile label is what you get in the kiln. Like I've seen that happen.
It's my biggest pet peeve. It's my biggest pet peeve because like in my mind at least, from my experience, the lower you go, the more accurate the bottle is.
Oh,
but the higher you go, there's a higher chance of like I don't want to name any companies because I feel like what if they sponsor us one day?
Right.
But at the same time, my biggest pet peeve is looking at the bottle, testing the glaze, and being like,
this isn't it.
This isn't at all what the bottle.
Yeah.
This is, and then I water it down, and it's still not it. And then I like put CMC, I play with it a bit, and I'm like, none of like I do like 10 pots, and I'm like, none of these are purple. These are all just like dark blue.
Oh, that's funny. That's interesting though.
I hate it so much. If I do a glaze review video and that happens, I'm like, I hate this glaze.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
There's a picture on the bottle, and it didn't come out how the picture on the bottle said it would.
Yep.
Hate it so much.
Bringing it back around that comes to reduction firings is that there can be a lot of variation, and that can be awesome.
Yeah.
And it can also be a thorn in your side.
I've never seen a bottle of Cone 10 reduction fire glaze. I've only ever seen them be made and developed.
Yeah, same.
Which I think is...
Because again, it's like the most common... The easiest firings and the easiest glazes to get access to are mid-range Cone 5, Cone 6.
Yeah,
Oxidation
I'm
glazes.
sure you can develop them, but like...
Oh, yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if that's like some weird form of like gatekeeping where it's like, no, we don't put them in bottles. You gotta make your own glaze if you want to get that high, okay? But at the same time, I'm like, I've just never seen it.
You know, I just thought of a song that could perfectly encapsulate this conversation.
Yeah.
Can you take me higher?
All right, okay.
Diddly
All right.
to a place where I am.
We're done now. All right.
And that's it for today. Thank you for listening to The Mud Peddlers with Lindsey M Dillon.
And Donte of Earth Nation.
Want to say hi and see what Donte and I are working on in our studios? Check out the show notes for links to our websites and social media below. You can find me at lindseymdillon.com. That's LINDSEY, M as in monster, DILLON.com. And on Etsy, Instagram, and Facebook at Lindsey M Dillon.
And you can find me at Earth Nation Ceramics. It's spelled exactly how you think it's spelled, but you can also find me on my Facebook fan page and Instagram at the same name at Earth Nation Ceramics.
If you enjoyed hanging out with us today, or you have a question or topic you'd like us to discuss, take a second to rate and review The Mud Peddlers in Apple Podcasts. It helps our podcast reach new listeners, and we really appreciate the feedback. Thanks again, and we'll catch you next time.